Hi, my name is Nick Bunick.
And Abbey Solnet.
And I'm Austin Jacobs.
And we are presenting on Ballast Point. So we'll start by talking about who Ballast Point is. They started as a home brew mart in 1992, where they were supplying their customers with home brew kits to essentially brew their own beer. That transcended into them bottling their beer in 1996. Because they had so much demand, they kind of saw a need for their consumers to actually have pre-made beer. So, like I said, it was founded in 1996 by Jack White in San Diego. At the moment, they are second in production volume, just behind Stone Brewery, and 11th in the nation. They were filing for an IPO in 2015, 2014, and during that process, we're also in talks for being acquired by a company called Constellation. After they agreed to basically allow them to operate in the way that they wanted, being Ballast, they finally announced their acquisition on November 2015 for $1 billion. So, I mean, as you all know, Ballast is widely recognized by, I think, everyone in San Diego. They've won 3 gold medals at the World Beer Cup in 2010, which Sculpin won IPA of the year, which is huge, and then in 2013, 2014, they won California Distillery of the year. So they're currently at 700 employees, which they are growing super fast, and like Michael said, HR is having a nightmare to try to keep up hiring everybody. So we initially reached out to several breweries, and Ballast got back to us within a matter of minutes. And we're very fortunate to have met with Michael. He was beyond helpful, super knowledgeable, and great person. So Ballast has currently 6 places where they make beer. The location we visited in Little Italy is the 3rd, and they're at the moment building one in Virginia. They just acquired some property out there, which will allow them to not have to ship beer across the country and save those costs of transportation. So their biggest ones are Scripps and Miramar, where they do the majority of their production. So the Little Italy brewery that we visited has a capacity of 5 barrels, meaning which is roughly 10 kegs, which is 15.5 gallons per keg. So the other breweries are much larger in size. So the purpose of this small operation, which actually loses money, like I said, though they make a lot of money in their tasting room outside, the operation itself loses money. Every year, or once a year, their employees have to go into the R&D brewery, and they're randomly paired with a team. So the CEO could be paired up with, someone in R&D and another department like finance or marketing, whatever, what have you. And they spend the whole day making their own custom beer. So they feed them at the R&D location all day. They work on this beer, and they get to name it. If the beer is good enough, it'll eventually, be bottled and have their artists that they've had since their inception will create the really cool design that you see on all their bottles. And but yeah, so their catalog is 700 beers. Obviously, not all of them are bottled and brewed, but they are able to make all those. And like I said, it's definitely a challenge for them to hire so many people because they're growing so fast.
So the next aspect we really looked at was inventory management, and again, this was just for the R&D location, so this is definitely scaled down in comparison to their Miramar and Scripps locations. But their lead time is about 1 week for ingredients, and as we heard from the Coronado company, brewing is very seasonal. So they look at what they're going to brew for the next month and see what supplies they need, and then they'll order those. Again, the employees work, so whatever employees are coming in that month, they'll ask what kind of ingredients they would like as well for the brew session. There's 2 R&D brewers and 1 director of R&D in charge of inventory in this location, and 95% of their hops come from Yakima, Washington, and their grains come from Wisconsin and Germany. And so their inventory is managed electronically, and it's very precise through their systems. We did not get to look at the inventory management Excel sheets and data set, but it is very precise through the electronic management.
So we actually wanted to dive into the beer making process, unlike the Coronado people, which they got the bottling side, so it's a good combination. So we have a few pictures to show, but just theoretically, there's really 5 big machines that Ballast Point uses, especially at this location. The first one is a machine where they take the grain, either wheat or barley, and they mill it into more of a powder. That's the first machine. You get sent to the second machine where they run water through it and they heat it up to create what's called wort, which is really sweet. Then they move the wort to a boiling kettle where they also add hops in, and that's a third machine that they go through. And that whole process takes about 3 hours as a whole. And then it's added to the ferment process where it's mixed with yeast and oxygen. And what happens is the alcohol that's from the barley and from the sugar that the wort is created, and the yeast will then eat up the sugar, almost like Pac-Man if you think about it, and it kind of, how Michael said, is it burps up alcohol. So that's how the alcohol gets in beer. And the sweeter the beer is, the higher alcohol content per beer, because if there's more sugar for the yeast to eat up, there's more alcohol left over. This is where the big bottleneck is. It can take up to a month to ferment for some beers. So with only having 5 big tanks, as Nick kind of alluded to, this is a huge issue. Is they can't ferment as much as they want. So with some of the beer that the R&D people make, some of it's like already pre-made, and they have kind of a chance to start the process of brewing the beer, but not necessarily see it all the way through fermentation or kind of finish it off. So it's kind of a mixture there. And the last aspect is called bright tanks, which Ballast Point doesn't really use, but that's where the smoke and mirrors is added. So let's say you're saying, okay, we're going to make an apricot beer, and when you go through the process of actually trying to add the apricot, when you taste it, it's like, wow, that has no apricot in it. What they'll do is they'll put it in the bright tank and throw like artificial apricot, or kind of add it in towards the end. So this is where the smoke and mirror happens. Ballast Point has these tanks just in case, but it never happens because, like Abbey was alluding to, it's a very exact science.
They're good at what they do.
So this is kind of just an overarching process where we start with barley and malt. It mills here, that's the first machine. The second machine where water goes through and filters it. The third part is where hops get added to the boiling process. From there, it moves into the fermentation, and it stays there in Ballast Point's case for a month, up to sometimes. And then, in this case, the beer doesn't get bottled, it gets put into kegs and then we drink right away. But in other places, it will go into the bottling process of filtering, bottling, and then packaging in the street. So this is what the beer making operation looks like at Ballast Point. So this is the first machine where they put the wheat and the grain in through here to put it into a powder. This is the second machine where they add water to, or this is the first and the second machine really where they add water to it. This aspect of it is where it goes over the top and into the tank where they add barley, or I'm sorry, not the barley, the hops, and add more water to it and heat it up. These right here on the back side that you can see from here is where the fermentation process happens. And then lastly, these are the bright tanks, which they don't use. The other thing about the yeast is will use the yeast over and over again, up to 10 times, 10 different batches. And they're very sustainable as they take that used up yeast and used up wheat and barley and mash up and actually sell it back to farmers where they get some of their ingredients from to feed to the cows, which then they use as fertilizer to then fertilize the wheat that they're getting and the hops that they're getting. So it's a sustainable model.
So, like we alluded to, the Little Italy location is a very popular spot to go hang out and purchase beer. So at a time, they have 64 different taps. You can kind of see that long wall. They actually just added a adjacent wall right there from the last year. So, like I already said, a keg has 15.5 gallons, and so you can see that each beer is tapped up to the keg right there, but they also have extra, probably about 2 kegs underneath for when the keg on tap runs out. And everyone in that location knows how to tap a keg, so if something runs out, they can just immediately run back and go ahead and fix that.
It's actually kind of like a Kanban system in some way that they have everything queued up and ready to go.
And so the way they forecast their need for beer is they take last year's sales and add 20% because, like you alluded to so many times, they're such a high growth company. They had a truck that visits every other day from either Scripps Ranch or Miramar that delivers these kegs because they don't have a huge production capacity at the Little Italy location.
So the beer will be produced up at the Miramar and Scripps locations, like Sculpin, which they don't make here, but that'll get tagged and get sent down to the Little Italy location so it's ready to be on tap.
just to wrap up, Austin and I also did a craft beer project for our consumer behavior class that we just presented on. So we just had some fun facts from that too about how Ballast Point has really been spearheading the craft beer movement in San Diego and across the country. Here's some of their artwork that we took that was in their Little Italy location. They have an artist who will say, hey, we're releasing a new beer. He'll go off on an island for 4 months and come back with one of these beautiful paintings, which comes in as part of their production. There's over 140, actually I think it's 120. I think
That's what we found. 140 is what Michael Craig said. 120 is what we
There's
found.
a lot of craft breweries in San Diego, and as consumers get over their beer palate gets more refined, I know through just going out and tasting myself, like my taste for beer has really changed this past semester. And West Coast drinkers are really 5 years ahead of East Coast drinkers in terms of their taste preferences, and West Coast loves the hops, so that's why IPAs are really successful out here.
Another fun fact we didn't add up there, but the biggest craft brewery is Samuel Adams, and they produce as much beer in 1 year that a big brewer like Coors Light spills when they pull different. So in the brewing process, we kind of showed there's different hoses that they have to plug into each place, and Coors Light spills more beer in the process of plugging in different places than Samuel Adams produces all beer.
Wow, really?
So craft beer is really small, but it's a growing industry across the country. So really exciting to be at the capital of it here in San Diego. These are some of their main challenges that they face. Weather with sourcing their products and meeting demand for different types of beer. It can be, luckily here in San Diego it's nice, but in other areas where they get their supplies from it can be a challenge. There's not enough tanks to brew beer. I think we've honed this point in that they're growing too fast in a way, and just the challenges of shipping beer across the country. Thanks, Michael, who are filming this for the tour and the free beer samples when we went to go visit. It was really a great experience. And if you all get the chance, they do tours at the Ballast Point Little Italy location.
Yeah,
Really
highly
interesting.
recommend it. But make sure you request Michael because he's the man.
Make sure it's
Yeah. Yeah, right?